the point of Brexit, the whole world is looking at Britain and they are saying, what's happening with all this Brexit paralysis? And I want them to know that we are a strong, self-confident country that is going to stand up for democratic values and the security you need. And at this moment in our history, a very exciting opening of a chapter in our history, I think we need to send that signal that Britain is back and our voice is going to be loud in the world.
You were going around the country making big spending pledges. The difference with the Labour Party, they did the same thing, but they produced their grey book and they said all current spending will be paid for, and they explained how it was going to be paid for. It wasn't popular, but they had the honesty to talk about the tax rises that they were going to require for their spending proposals. You are not. You say you're being straight with people, but you have big spending plans which appear to come from extra borrowing and crossed fingers about the future state of the economy.
No, not at all. The Treasury themselves say that they have about £26 billion of headroom. That means that you could spend that money without increasing taxes, while sticking to the Chancellor's own fiscal rules. But what I'm saying is spend that money wisely. That's the choice the Prime Minister has to make. Spend it in a way that increases the growth of the economy, that creates more opportunities for young people, that turbocharges what could be the most dynamic pro-business, pro-enterprise economy in Europe. And then you create the wealth for all those other things. As Health Secretary, I campaigned very hard for extra money for the NHS. I'd like our new social mission to be the education system, as you talked about. I do think they need some more resources there.
Social care.
And social care. You can do those things if the economy is going from strength to strength, and that's what you get with a business person running it.
Several times you have mentioned this phrase, headroom, and we're going to hear it again and again and again, I suspect, in the context of this contest. So let me read you what Paul Johnson, Admitted Director of the IFS, it's a respected body, says. Spending the £26 billion fiscal headroom simply means borrowing that much more each year. It is certainly not consistent with the Conservative manifesto commitment to a balanced budget. And the current Chancellor, Philip Hammond, says a damaging no-deal Brexit would soak up all the fiscal headroom we've built up. That is not money that you can honestly spend now.
Well, Philip Hammond is right, that if we had a no-deal Brexit, then some of these spending commitments would have to wait, because you would need to divert that money to support businesses up and down the country, farms, manufacturers and so on. So it is true, and that is why Philip Hammond has built up that headroom in case we have a no-deal Brexit.
So with no deal, you drop these spending pledges?
I wouldn't drop them, because I think we can make a success of no deal, but I would...
How would you pay for them?
Well, I'm saying they would take longer, because you wouldn't have that money at your fingertips straight away. Well, Andrew, we can't answer that question, but let me just tell you, of those commitments, the one that I would not drop is the one to reduce corporation tax. As I say, it's not the tax cut people are talking about on the doorstep when you meet them, but it is one that would fire up the economy in a way that would be helpful in a no-deal contest, because we would have, economic bumpiness, and we need to support businesses, and putting money in the pockets of businessmen at that moment would, I think, be the right thing to do.
Now, your campaign has made a big deal this morning about your new Brexit negotiating team, and your whole appeal really to Tory members has been, I'm the guy who can do the deal. So just explain to us what the plan is.
Well, I've indicated this morning the kind of international team that I will put together, the best negotiators in the business for the trade deal that we will negotiate.
Have you got Stephen Harper on board?
He is someone that, we've been having discussions with him, and he's someone whose talents I would very much hope to use. But my point is this, that is for the trade deal post leaving the EU. But ahead of that, we have got to leave the EU, and we know that Parliament will try very hard to stop a no-deal Brexit. So the quickest way, the safest way to leave the EU is to send to Brussels someone that they will talk to, someone who can negotiate a better deal, a deal that can get through Parliament. And I believe I'm the person to do that.
I was up in Scotland last week, and everyone was very, very interested in your answer when you were asked, in the end, Brexit or the Union, which comes first? And you said the Union every time. Is that your position?
It is my position. But I think that for Conservative Party members, what they would say, and I agree with them, is that we want both, because we are a union, and one of the most important things about our union is that we are a democracy. And that means we are a country where we do what
Sure.
the people tell us to do, and that means delivering Brexit.
So the reason I'm asking that is almost every Scottish Conservative I've spoken to or heard from on this believes that a no-deal Brexit would be a real threat to the Union and could end Great Britain. David Mundell, who's the Scottish Secretary at the moment, has said, called no deal a threat to the continuance of the United Kingdom. That is a very, very strong feeling in Scotland, and yet, as our potential Prime Minister, that's where you're prepared to take us. So how can you say that the Union comes first?
Andrew, I have Welsh blood in me, Irish blood in me. I spent a couple of very happy years of my childhood in Scotland. I am a unionist to my fingertips, and I will never allow our union to be broken up. And what people
Unless
like
delivering Brexit means a no deal, in which case you will.
No, because what David Mundell said is right, that of course there are risks. You think what someone like Nicola Sturgeon would do politically if we had a no-deal situation, and we would have to get through that. And that is why a no-deal Brexit is not my first choice. But in the end, if the only way to leave the European Union is without a deal... Let me finish, Andrew. If the only way to leave the European Union is without a deal, then I would do that, and we will make a success of it, and we will protect the Union, but we would have to be very sensitive to the concerns that people like David Mundell raised, because you're absolutely right, it would not be popular in Scotland.
I don't understand how it can both be the Union first every time and being prepared to endanger that by going for a no-deal Brexit. Those two things must be in contradiction.
No, because it's not a question of choosing one or the other. It's a question. No, it's not. It's a question of choosing a prime minister who has the capability to deliver both. And if you send to Brussels someone who can negotiate a deal that can get through Parliament, then you won't have a no-deal situation, and then you reduce those risks. But I'm also very clear that we are going to leave the European Union come what may, and I will deliver that. But if that happens, I will do it in a way that protects the Union, because it's absolutely vital we do.
If that happens, we're talking again about a no deal. There's quite a moment in one of the hustings where you were talking about going to a company in Kidderminster with 350 employees, doing very, very well in European markets, and you talked about the devastating effect that 10% tariffs would have on that company. Now, if you go through no deal, every person in that company will lose their jobs. You were, as you famously said again and again and again, an entrepreneur. You've built up a business. Lots and lots of people who have built up their businesses around the country, including the guy behind that business, will lose their companies if you take us through no deal. Are you really prepared to do that? Are you prepared to look those people in the eye and say, you've got to lose your job because I'm going for no deal?
I would do so, but I would do it with a heavy heart, precisely because of the risks. But if you choose someone who has got a better chance of negotiating a deal, then you're not going to have to face that decision.
How would you feel if your company was in that position? If you'd built up your company and a politician came along and said, I'm sorry, I'm going to destroy your company because I've got an ideological reason why I have to do that?
Well, what I would say to the people in that company, is that I go around the world as Foreign Secretary, and I find that people have a whole lot more respect for us than we sometimes have for ourselves. And the heart of that respect is that we are one of the oldest and greatest democracies in the world, and we are a country where politicians do what the people tell them to do. So if, in order to do what the people tell us to do, we have to leave without a deal, I would do that, but I would find support for those companies to help them weather the storms. As a businessman, I know that's not going to be easy, but I will be there for them. But in the end, if we don't do what the people tell us to do, we're not a democracy, and I don't think even those businesses would want me to ignore what people have told us to do.
You told me last time we talked that Boris Johnson's deadline was a fake deadline. It wasn't a real deadline. Now, you don't have a real deadline at the moment, and I asked you 10 times when your real deadline for us leaving the EU was, and you weren't able to give me an answer. So can I ask you one more time, will you definitely get us out of the EU this year?
Well, I think this is a fake debate, actually, Andrew. Let me explain why. Because the difference between me and Boris is not as big as people are saying. If we got to the end of October and we've got a deal and we're trying to get it through Parliament, but we need a few more parliamentary days, I'm not going to rip up that deal. Boris is. But let me finish. No, Andrew, let me finish. At the beginning of October, if there is no prospect of a deal that can get through Parliament, then I will leave at the end of October, because that is our democratic promise to the British people.
One more time, because Michael Gove answered these kind of questions. And he said, well, a few days, a few weeks. And I said, by the end of November, by the end of this year. And he said, definitely by the end of this year. Sure. Can you say the same?
I believe we'll leave sooner with me than with Boris or anyone else, because I am the person most likely to negotiate a deal, and that is the quickest way to leave. But, what you're saying is something that is a dilemma. Look, Parliament is trying to stop a no-deal Brexit. They succeeded before. They may succeed again. That is an issue that will face any Prime Minister, whatever they've said about the 31st of October. The quickest way to leave the EU is to choose a Prime Minister who can actually get us a deal that can get through Parliament. And if you want a deal done, ask a business person.
Jeremy